Well, Prince Louis vision has emerged of him absolutely beaming.
I was just saying, Louis doesn't understand social distancing, so he goes up like wanting to cuddle everything, and particularly any babies younger than him.
The palace sparkle was a performance, and behind that glittering smile, something was quietly cracking. For years, the world laughed at the cheeky grin, the exaggerated waves, the dramatic ear covering moments of Prince Louis, the youngest son of Catherine, Princess of Wales and Prince William. He was the comic relief, the tiny royal rebel, the adorable distraction during stiff balcony appearances. But what if those viral moments were not random bursts of mischief? What if they were signals? Signals that were noticed inside the palace long before the public ever started speculating. Because beyond the palace gates, whispers reportedly echoed through private corridors. Staff departures happened quietly. Officially, personal reasons. Unofficially, something felt heavier, something unsettled. And now, a palace psychologist has allegedly dropped a revelation so explosive it has left Catherine devastated and insiders shaken. To the world, Prince Louis looked perfect beside his older siblings, Prince George of Wales and Princess Charlotte of Wales. George stood tall, Charlotte curtsied with rehearsed grace. They embodied composure. But Louis was unpredictable, sometimes late, sometimes absent, sometimes surrounded by handlers hovering just a little too close. At grand events like the Platinum Jubilee of Elizabeth II and the Wimbledon Championships, cameras caught moments that divided the internet. He covered his ears during thunderous applause. He stared blankly before bursting into laughter that felt forced. Was it overstimulation? Was it nerves? Or was it something deeper? Inside palace walls, nights were reportedly not always peaceful. Some former aides hinted at long crying spells, not tantrums, not stubborn royal defiance, but quiet, heavy crying that felt harder to soothe. One former caregiver allegedly described moments when he seemed distant, lost in his own thoughts, unreachable even in comfort. And yet, concerns were brushed aside. The royal machine does not pause for vulnerability. It adjusts optics. It tightens control. It moves forward. Observers began to notice patterns. When Louis appeared publicly, guidance seemed constant. Gentle taps on his shoulder, quick whispers, subtle repositioning. On camera, affectionate. Off camera, according to insiders, urgent reminders. Keep him smiling, guide him if he freezes. Hot microphones reportedly caught fragments. Feeds cut abruptly. Clips vanished before airing. Coincidence or choreography? Because the monarchy survives on image, strength, stability, continuity. There is little room for visible fragility. Then came the silence. Media outlets that once replayed every cheeky face suddenly softened their coverage. Photographers framed wider shots. Close-ups became rarer. Reporters were allegedly advised to avoid misinterpreting behavior, presented as sensitivity. Critics called it control. But behind that control, something else was unfolding. The family reportedly sought outside support. A respected child psychologist entered quietly under the safe label of educational consultant. Discretion was everything. Her sessions were meant to be routine. A few observations, a few notes, a quiet conclusion. But almost immediately, something felt different. Sources close to the process claimed Prince Louis spoke carefully, measuring words beyond his years. Polite, intelligent, hyper-aware. And then, a question that reportedly stopped the doctor cold. Why do I have to smile when I'm scared? That was not a child misbehaving. That was a child trying to understand performance, trying to understand why the world only claps when he looks happy. He described loud rooms, flashing cameras, cheering crowds that felt too big. He spoke about confusion, about not knowing when he could be himself and when he had to perform. They only look at me when I'm happy, he allegedly said. The psychologist began noticing patterns. After public appearances, energy crashes. In calm settings, he was bright, articulate, deeply curious. Under intense exposure, his body language tightened. Eye contact faded. Words became sparse. Sometimes emotional overload, other times complete shutdown. When the psychologist raised concerns, insiders claimed the response was polite and delayed. Reduce exposure? Consider structured therapeutic support? Increase protected downtime? Acknowledged. Deferred. Because the public must see happiness, the image must remain steady. Weeks passed. Observers noticed subtle withdrawal, smiles more rehearsed, eye contact shorter. In one private session, he reportedly whispered a wish for somewhere quiet, somewhere without cameras. And then came the report. Calm, clinical, not dramatic, just documented patterns. Social withdrawal under stress, heightened sensitivity to sound and light, strong emotional reactions when overwhelmed. And one chilling line, if ignored, these patterns could evolve into a deeper identity struggle later in life. Shockwaves rippled through royal circles. Because history history has already shown what pressure can do. Look at Prince Harry, a young boy who once walked behind the coffin of Diana, Princess of Wales in 1997 while the world watched. For many, it symbolized duty. For him, it marked the beginning of a lifetime under relentless scrutiny. In interviews with ITV and coverage surrounding his memoir reported by the BBC, Harry spoke openly about panic attacks, emotional shutdown, unresolved grief, and the crushing weight of expectation. He described growing up in a system where vulnerability was private but performance was mandatory. He admitted to shutting down emotionally in his 20s. He spoke of anger, isolation, the cameras never left. Now ask yourself, if one prince struggled under that weight, what happens when another child shows early signs of sensory overload in a world amplified by social media, where every reaction becomes a meme within minutes? George carries the calm air energy. Charlotte carries poised precision. Louis carries unpredictability. And unpredictability inside a monarchy can feel dangerous. Behind closed doors, insiders say tension grew. Some staff believed tradition must hold. Others feared young shoulders were bending too early. Emotional breakdowns reportedly happened before major appearances. Requests were made for fewer events, calmer environments. Not all were welcomed. Because what happens when an heir does not fit the rigid mold history expects? Does tradition bend? Or does the child? Catherine has publicly championed early childhood mental health through initiatives and speeches, emphasizing emotional security in the first 5 years of life. Is that purely public service or something more personal? Because when you watch her kneel at eye level, gently guiding, whispering reassurance, holding small hands tightly during noisy parades, it feels deliberate, protective, almost urgent. There has been no confirmed diagnosis, no official palace admission, no public bombshell, but silence can be louder than scandal. Carefully curated appearances, reduced exposure, softer framing, a shift in narrative. And at the center of it all remains a young boy still waving from balconies, still smiling beneath bright lights, still carrying a weight history rarely acknowledges in children. The monarchy depends on appearance, strength, stability, but beneath that polished surface, fragility may be emerging where perfection is expected. If the psychologist's internal assessment truly warned of identity struggles if patterns were ignored, then this is no longer about cute viral clips. It is about a crossroads. Are we witnessing the quiet beginning of a generational shift, or the subtle repetition of a cycle history has already documented? Because the pressure will not dim, the cameras will not disappear, and somewhere behind palace walls, a sensitive child may still be asking why he has to smile when he is scared. And here is where the story becomes even more unsettling, because this was never just about one psychologist's report or a few uncomfortable balcony moments. It is about the collision between centuries of royal expectation and a modern understanding of childhood vulnerability. And insiders suggest that once the internal assessment began circulating among senior palace figures, the atmosphere subtly shifted, not publicly, never publicly, but in scheduling rooms and private briefings, in those closed-door strategy meetings where optics are weighed heavier than emotions. The question reportedly whispered was not, is he okay? But, how do we manage this? Because in a monarchy built on continuity, unpredictability feels like risk, and Prince Louis, the so-called spare behind Prince George of Wales and Princess Charlotte of Wales, occupies a historically complicated position, close enough to the throne to matter symbolically, far enough to be shaped differently, yet always visible, always watched. Being the spare has never been simple. History has shown that spares often struggle with identity, caught between duty and distance, between belonging and displacement. And when you combine that historical tension with a personality reportedly sensitive to noise, light, and intense public energy, you begin to see why some insiders are quietly alarmed. Publicly, everything appears stable, curated photographs, carefully timed appearances, warm family moments during events like the Platinum Jubilee of Elizabeth II or outings to the Wimbledon Championships. But behind that polish, exposure is being recalibrated, appearances shortened, environments controlled, because the palace understands one brutal truth. In the age of viral clips, a child's overwhelmed reaction can become global commentary within minutes. Unlike the childhood of Prince Harry, which unfolded in the shadow of paparazzi but before the full explosion of social media, Louise is growing up in a world where every blink is replayed, memed, dissected, and archived permanently, and experts repeatedly warn that constant observation can distort identity formation, turning natural self-awareness into hyper-self-consciousness. If a child learns that joy is rewarded with applause and discomfort is met with scrutiny, what happens internally? Does he begin to edit himself? To perform automatically? To suppress instinct? That alleged question to the psychologist, why do I have to smile when I'm scared, echoes louder when placed against this backdrop, because it hints at a child already calculating expectation versus authenticity. And then there is Catherine, Princess of Wales, whose public mission through the Royal Foundation Center for Early Childhood has intensified in both urgency and visibility. She speaks about emotional scaffolding, resilience, safe relationships, nurturing environments in the first 5 years. And while there is no verified diagnosis, no confirmed leak, no official palace admission of crisis, it is impossible to ignore how personal her advocacy can feel. Observers have noted the way she kneels to eye level, how she whispers reassurance, how she gently steadies small shoulders in loud environments, how she appears hyper-aware during chaotic public moments. And some insiders claim that witnessing her youngest struggle even briefly and overwhelming settings sharpened her resolve, transforming policy into something deeply lived. The monarchy historically prized stoicism, tears were private, discipline was rigid, deviation corrected swiftly, but this generation is attempting something different, blending tradition with contemporary child psychology. And yet tension lingers because institutions do not pivot easily. Senior figures reportedly debate how much flexibility is permissible without appearing unstable, how much protection can be offered without signaling weakness, and whether reducing exposure undermines the very visibility that sustains royal relevance. Meanwhile, Prince William stands at the center of this balancing act, determined to prepare his children for duty without repeating patterns of emotional suppression that haunted previous generations. He has spoken publicly about mental health, about vulnerability, about breaking cycles, lessons undoubtedly influenced by what he witnessed in the aftermath of Diana, Princess of Wales's death, and his brother's later admissions during interviews with ITV and coverage reported by the BBC. And perhaps that history is the unspoken shadow over this entire situation. Because if Harry's story taught the world anything, it is that unresolved childhood strain does not vanish. It resurfaces, sometimes decades later, sometimes explosively. So, insiders quietly ask, has the institution truly learned, or is it merely managing optics more carefully? Appearances suggest evolution, yet structure remains ceremonial, symbolic, relentless. Royal children are still icons before they are individuals, their posture analyzed, their expressions interpreted as national barometers. And for a child who reportedly experiences sensory intensity more sharply, that environment can feel like standing under a spotlight that never cools. Still, there are protective measures, scheduling adjustments, strategic schooling choices, emotional support systems, and modern parenting techniques are reportedly being prioritized, ensuring breaks after major events, limiting prolonged exposure to deafening crowds, offering grounding strategies. Before stepping onto balconies, this is not scandal in the confirmed sense, it is friction between legacy and humanity. It is the quiet realization that heirs are not marble statues, but developing minds. And perhaps that is the real bombshell. Not a medical label, not a dramatic diagnosis, but the acknowledgement that even within gilded walls, childhood remains fragile. The monarchy survives on continuity, yet continuity depends on healthy individuals. And if Louis is indeed navigating heightened sensitivity under extraordinary scrutiny, then how he is supported now could shape the institution decades from today. Will tradition soften enough to accommodate individuality? Will visibility be recalibrated to protect identity? Or will the pressure simply be absorbed silently until it resurfaces later in ways no strategist can control? For now, the public still sees the waves, the smiles, the carefully framed family images, and perhaps that is intentional. But somewhere beyond the balcony railings, beyond the applause and camera flashes, a deeper negotiation is unfolding between expectation and emotional truth. And the most unsettling part is this: we may never see the decisive moment when the balance tips. Because in royal life, the most significant shifts rarely happen in front of cameras. They happen in whispers, in private decisions, in parenting choices made far from public view. Whether this story becomes a quiet success of modern adaptation or a cautionary tale that echoes history again is something only time will reveal. Until then, the world will keep watching Prince Louis wave, unaware of the invisible calculations surrounding every appearance, every smile, every fleeting look that might mean more than we think.